If you've ever traveled solo in Japan, you might have heard about rooms sealed with ofuda, paper talismans meant to keep spirits inside. They're usually found in old ryokans, traditional inns, places where time seems to have stopped. Most people say it's just superstition, a spooky tourist gimmick. I used to think the same. Until I stayed in room 203. My name is Ayaka. I'm 25 years old. A realist. The kind of person who likes things clear, logical, and never believed in anything remotely spiritual. My trip to Kyoto was supposed to be simple, a way to escape the pressure after quitting my job, and my mother's sudden death. All I wanted was a few quiet nights. But the Ryokan I booked, tucked away in a narrow alley near Kiyomizu Temple, ended up dragging me into something I've never dared to tell anyone. Not even out loud. The price was shockingly cheap. The host was polite, but reserved. And the room I was given, room 203, had just been reopened after being left untouched for nearly 20 years. I still remember the torn strip of yellow paper hanging loosely across the wooden doorframe. When I asked about it, the owner just gave a half smile and said, "Probably just a prank from the previous guest." That first night, I was woken up by 3 knocks on the door, sharp, cold, and perfectly spaced. The clock read 2:11 a.m. No one was outside. But when I turned back into the room, I swear I saw a tiny bare foot vanish behind the shoji screen near the end of the room. I tried to let it go. Until the second night. And that's when I saw her, the pale-faced girl with hollow black eyes, standing directly behind me in the mirror. And from that moment on, I knew, this wasn't just about staying in the wrong room. I had stepped into a place that was sealed for a reason. And the worst part wasn't the girl. My full name is Ayaka Suda. I was born and raised in Osaka in a modest but stable home. I was an only child. My mother was my best friend. She always told me not to let fear control the parts of life we can't predict. I believed I was a rational person. Spirits, omens, karma, those were just ways people tried to explain the unknown. I believed in facts. In science. In things you could see, touch, and explain. So when my mother passed away suddenly from a stroke, just months after I earned my master's degree in psychology, my world didn't just crack, it collapsed. Not because I saw it as a sign. But because for the first time in my life, I couldn't control anything. I quit my job. Moved out of the tiny apartment I once shared with my mom. And I started drifting from town to town across Japan, trying to avoid myself. Short trips. Cheap lodgings. Brief conversations with strangers. I always left before anyone could ask too much. Kyoto was supposed to be just another stop. I found this Ryokan deep in the Higashiyama district, known for its ancient temples, stone alleyways, and a heavy stillness that hangs in the winter air like a curtain. In December, the whole town feels like it belongs to another world, quiet, misty, and cold in a way that seeps into your bones. The inn wasn't listed on Google Maps. I found it through an old travel blog, posted 3 years ago, barely any reviews, and no clear photos of the rooms. But the price was more than reasonable. And back then, that was all I needed. I arrived in the late afternoon. The sky was already dimming, and the soft yellow glow of lanterns hanging under the eaves made the place look warmer than I expected. The owner, Mr. Yamato, was a thin man in his 60s. Soft voice, sharp eyes. He didn't talk much. Just asked where I was from and how many nights I'd stay. 3, I said. He hesitated for just a moment, barely a second, then nodded and handed me the key, room 203. There was no elevator. I dragged my wooden suitcase up a narrow staircase. Each step creaked like a whisper from something too old and too tired to complain anymore. When I opened the door, I saw it, a yellow paper charm taped across the wooden frame. Half of it had torn off, fluttering slightly in the breeze. The ink on the kanji had already faded. Maybe an ofuda, but I didn't think much of it. I figured it was decorative, part of the traditional charm most old inns tried to keep up. I had no idea. I had just stepped into a place that should have been left forgotten. When the front door of the Ryokan shut behind me, I felt it right away, like I'd just stepped out of the world I knew. Not because it was quiet, but because that silence didn't feel natural. The two-story wooden house, with its black-tiled roof covered in moss, gave off a glow from the paper lanterns lining the hallway, just bright enough to make the dust in the air shimmer. There was the faint scent of incense, like the kind you'd find at a shrine, but here, it was heavier. Thicker. Like it had soaked deep into the wooden beams and tatami mats over decades. Each of my steps made the old floorboards creak softly beneath me. The high wooden ceiling echoed just enough to make every sound feel distant, unfamiliar. I remember thinking, something's off. Not anything obvious. Just a quiet whisper from my gut saying, be careful. Mr. Yamato led me up the stairs. They were narrow. The wooden handrail polished smooth, no doubt touched by thousands of hands over the years. At the top, he pointed to the end of the hallway and handed me an old brass key, tied to a red cloth cord. Room 203. 3 nights. If anything feels wrong, call me. His voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was the kind of sentence someone says hundreds of times, until it means nothing. I gave a small nod, thanked him, and walked in the direction he pointed. The second-floor hallway stretched longer than I expected. Rooms on both sides. Shoji doors made of paper and wood. Aged to a soft yellow. No sounds. Just the wind sneaking through unseen cracks. No TVs. No conversations. I didn't see a single person as I made my way down the hall. Room 203 was near the end. On the left. And the moment I stood in front of it, I felt it. Something was wrong. The sliding door had faint markings, remnants of a charm once drawn in black ink. The strokes had faded. As if someone tried to scrub them away. Near the top corner, there was a small scorch mark, no bigger than a coin, like an incense stick had burned down completely without being put out. Out of habit. I almost knocked, then remembered this was my room. I slid the door open. It moved with resistance, the wood groaning as if trying to warn me. Inside, the room was dimmer than I expected. A paper lantern sat in the corner on the floor, casting a warm, flickering light, just enough to see everything. Wooden walls. Tatami floor. A low tea table. A futon already laid out. On the table, a pot of hot water and 2 cups. I came alone. And I hadn't asked for tea. I told myself it was just a courtesy, maybe the owner had mistakenly prepared the room for 2. But no matter how I rationalized it, something about the space felt off. The air inside was heavy. Unnaturally cold. I set my suitcase down and slowly walked around the room. Trying to get used to the space. On the wall opposite the bed, there was a large mirror in a wooden frame, but the glass was old, clouded, mottled. As I stood in front of it, the dim light from the corner cast a warped, stretched shadow behind me, one that didn't quite match my shape. I turned to look. Nothing. Just me, and the room. Nothing had happened. But something had already begun. I still remember it clearly, nothing had happened yet, but my body reacted in ways my logic couldn't explain. The moment I closed the door, the air felt thicker. Not like there was less oxygen, but like something was watching me. That feeling coated my skin, tightened in my chest, made me inhale deeper, just to make sure it was all in my head. I turned on the space heater in the corner. It rumbled for a moment, then went quiet. But the room stayed cold, especially near the old mirror. I held out my hand, and saw my breath. And it wasn't even dark out yet. But inside, it was colder than the hallway had been. I tried opening the window, thinking fresh air might help. The frame creaked as I pulled it open. And a sharp gust swept in. Outside was a tiny courtyard garden, like something out of a painting. Carefully placed stones, bonsai trees, a stone lantern in the far corner. But I couldn't focus on any of that. I kept feeling like someone had just been standing there. Right where I was. Watching me from behind the window. I shut it quickly. Pulled the curtain closed. The room dimmed a little more. The lantern's glow became the only light. My shadow stretched across the tatami, long and uneven, as if another shape was tangled in mine. I looked behind me. Nothing. Just fatigue, I told myself. A long day of travel. Cold weather. My mother still weighing heavy on my thoughts. It was all in my head. Just my nerves. I sat down on the futon. Reaching for my coat from the suitcase. And that's when I heard it. A soft tap. Just one. From under the bed. I froze. Heart racing. I listened again. Silence. Just the heater not working. The quiet tick of the wall clock. I bent down to look. Beneath the bed was pitch black. Nothing. But what chilled me was the faint indent in the tatami, right next to the bed. Like someone had knelt there. Not recently, but not long ago either. Right in the path from the door to where I was now sitting. I tried to shake it off. I turned on some soft music from my phone, anything to make the space feel normal again. But every sound, the creak of the dresser, the sway of the light cord, made me jump. It was too quiet. So quiet. Even small noises felt wrong. And what unsettled me most was the total silence from the other rooms. No footsteps. No conversations. No opening or closing of doors. And I knew for a fact at least 3 other guests had checked in. I saw their slippers near the entrance earlier. But that night, it was just me. And room 203. And the cold seeping from the floor into my spine, telling me something was watching. Not directly. But definitely. Getting closer. I didn't sleep that night. Even with 2 layers of blankets. Soft ambient music playing from my phone, and the nightlight left on till morning, sleep stayed just out of reach. Like there was a thin veil between me and any sense of peace. The glow from the paper lantern cast shifting patches of light across the ceiling. The ticking clock marked time 1 heavy second at a time. I don't remember falling asleep. But at some point, exhaustion must have dragged my eyes shut. Until I woke up with a start. 3 taps. Not loud. Not rushed. But unmistakably real. I opened my eyes and scanned the room. Everything looked the same. The light was still on. The heater had turned off, when, I didn't know. I reached for my phone. 2:11 a.m. It wasn't the wind. Not a rat. Not my imagination. Someone had just knocked on my door. I sat up. My heart pounded hard in my chest. The silence was too perfect. Too still. I stepped carefully to the door, leaned in. And peered through the thin gap in the shoji screen. Nothing. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No breathing. Just silence. I hesitated, then slid the door open a few inches. The hallway stretched out, the dim lantern outside the small window casting long shadows across the walls. I looked left, no one. Right, still no one. I was just about to shut the door when I heard it. A sound. Faint. Distant. But real. A giggle. Soft. Childlike. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside the room. Behind me. I spun around. Nothing had changed. The room was still empty. But the air, it was different. The cold had shifted. Sharper. Wetter. Like morning mist brushing against my skin. The hair on my arms stood up. I closed the door, drew the curtain, and rushed back to bed. I didn't want to check. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to bury myself under the covers and wait for morning. But just a few minutes later. Tap. A new sound. Sharp. Soft. Metallic. I held my breath. It came again. Steady. Not rushed. Not slow. Like tiny fingernails scraping across the floor. Then, silence. I didn't move. The light was still on. But now that made things worse, because it let me see. Scratches. Small, faint scratches along the wooden door. I hadn't noticed them before. Like claw marks. I glanced at the mirror. It reflected the room, just as it had earlier. Just me. But the glow behind me, it wasn't bright enough to cast that second shadow standing beside mine. I shut my eyes tight. Told myself I was tired. Told myself it was a half-sleep hallucination. That it had to be. But even now, I can't forget that child's laughter in the middle of the night, sweet and warped, echoing like it came from somewhere far away, or from right under my bed. The next morning, I woke up groggy, like I'd lived through a dream that didn't let go. My shoulders ached. My eyes burned. And the faint, metallic smell still clung to the air. But the most real thing of all was the scratch on the doorframe. About a foot long. I was sure it hadn't been there the night before. I left the Ryokan a little after 8 a.m. Trying to find a cafe nearby, somewhere I could breathe, reset. Kyoto in the morning was calm. The light was soft as silk over the rooftops and moss-covered tiles. Everything looked so peaceful. So beautiful, it almost made last night feel like a twisted memory. But I knew I had to look into it. I searched room 203 Ryokan Higashiyama Kyoto on my phone. Nothing. I went back to the old blog where I'd found the place. The post was still there, but no comments, no mention of room 203. Like it never existed. Or like someone wanted it gone. Just as I was getting up to leave, a voice came from the table beside me. "You stayed at that Ryokan, didn't you?" I turned. A man in his 30s. Round glasses. An old film camera and a leather-bound notebook in front of him. I nodded. Cautiously. "Room 203, he asked again, this time softer. I didn't speak. But the look in my eyes answered for me. He sighed. "I'm Kento. I'm working on a photo series about forgotten places in Japan. That Ryokan, it used to be a sealed site. You're not the first one to experience something in that room." A chill ran down my back. I asked what he meant. Kento opened his notebook and flipped to a wrinkled page. A sketch in black ink, a circle with a seal drawn in the center. It matched the faded mark I'd seen on the room's doorframe. Below it, handwritten notes. 203, female, age 8, froze to death in room. 1945, Kento said. When the bombs started falling over Kyoto, some families hid in old storage buildings. That Ryokan used to be a military supply house. One girl got trapped inside, door locked. No one made it back in time. The room was sealed after that. But the Ryokan's new owner, Yamato's son, removed the charm last year. Since then, At least 2 guests have left in the middle of the night. 1. He paused. Went missing. My breath slowed. If you heard knocking, Kento went on, it was testing you. If you respond, or open the door 3 times, it knows you can see. I whispered. I already opened the door. He looked at me for a long moment. Then reached into his notebook and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, a small charm, drawn by hand. Keep the light on tonight. And don't look into the mirror after 2 a.m. If you hear a child's voice again, it hasn't left yet. I returned to the Ryokan around 6 p.m., just as the Kyoto sky turned a pale shade of ash. And the cold mist began to drift down from the distant hills. Mr. Yamato was still at the front desk, sitting as if he hadn't moved all day. I forced a polite smile. He gave a small nod. No greeting. No words. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, each step heavier than the night before. When I opened the door to room 203, a wave of cold air hit me, sharp enough to make me shiver. Even with a warm cup of tea in my hand. The lights were still on. Nothing seemed out of place. But something was different. I didn't notice it at first. Not until I placed the cup down and looked around, then I saw it. The mirror had been cleaned. The dusty haze that covered the glass yesterday, the film I clearly remembered, was gone. The surface was spotless now. Clear enough to reflect every detail of the room, every line on my face. I didn't do that. And I hadn't told anyone. I pulled the curtain shut, turned on the extra lamp. Then reached into my backpack and took out the charm Kento had given me that morning. I placed it on the doorframe, right where the original seal had once been. Then I waited. Not because I was brave. But because I needed to know. I needed to know what was hiding behind the knocks, the giggles, and the look Mr. Yamato gave me when he handed over the key. Time crawled. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could almost hear someone whispering, words twisted, not quite language, but enough to freeze my spine. 1:57 a.m. The room was still lit. Wind hissed outside the window. The paper lantern flickered once, then steadied. 1:59. The heater paused. Not off, just silent. Then I heard footsteps. Not from the hallway. On the tatami. Inside the room. I turned my head slowly. No one. But when I looked toward the mirror, I saw something that didn't belong. There wasn't just me in the reflection. There was a small figure behind me. Near the wall. A child. Long hair covering her face. Standing still. I froze. I didn't dare turn around. I squeezed my eyes shut, told myself it was just warped light, like before. But then I heard it, soft scratching. Fingernails, against the wooden frame. I opened my eyes. The mirror was still clear. The girl wasn't standing anymore. She was crouching. Right behind me. Head bowed. Arms wrapped around her knees. Then, slowly, she looked up. Her face was pale, ghostly white. Her eyes were empty, deep black hollows, dried blood caked around her mouth. Her hair clumped in patches, hanging low. But what truly paralyzed me was her smile. A slow, broken smile. Like a spasm rather than an expression. I spun around. The room was empty. The mirror was back to normal. She was gone. Except for one thing, a tiny footprint on the tatami. Still damp. As if she'd stepped in from the rain. But it hadn't rained all day. And under the flickering light, I saw it, scrawled faintly across the mirror, written in dried, rusty brown. Keishite. Give it back. I left the Ryokan the next morning with dark circles under my eyes, my hands still trembling, and a low throb behind my temples. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. After that face appeared in the mirror, I'd curled up in the corner of the room and stayed there until dawn broke through the curtain. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't think. I just repeated 3 words over and over in my head: I'm still alive. I went straight to the same cafe I'd met Kento in. I sat at the same table. And waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. He never came. I texted him. No response. I called. It rang 3 times, then stopped. That's when I started to feel it, something was wrong. That sense crept up my throat, made each sip of coffee stick halfway down. Kento was careful. Just yesterday morning, he'd warned me, given me the charm, drawn the seal by hand. And now, nothing. I went back to the Ryokan just before noon. Mr. Yamato was wiping down the counter. He looked exactly the same, not warm, not cold. Just distant. I gathered my courage and asked. Did you see the man from yesterday? The one with the camera? His name was Kento. He looked up at me for a few seconds. Then turned away, resumed wiping. He checked out last night. Left around midnight. I froze. That's not possible. He told me he'd meet me this morning. He shrugged. Maybe he changed his mind. It happens. People don't always stay 3 nights here. I wanted to press further, but something in his eyes stopped me. Something like exhaustion. Or knowledge. Something too heavy to share. I turned to head upstairs. Passing the corridor on the left, I noticed a storage room door left slightly open. A breeze from somewhere stirred the curtain inside, revealing a small folded note beneath the table. I don't know why I stepped in. But I did. It was a piece of folded paper, stepped on and creased. Written in shaky black ink. Don't look in the mirror after 2 a.m. In the bottom corner, barely legible. Kento. I stood frozen. The paper was old. Frayed at the edges. And right beside it was a broken memory card. Split in half. Strands of black hair, fine and brittle, still clung to it. I picked it up. Not sure if it was fear or instinct driving me. Back in my room, I plugged the surviving piece into my card reader. The file loaded. Just one image. Grainy. Black and white. A photo of the second-floor hallway of the Ryokan. In the shot, right outside room 203, was me. But what made my breath stop was the small figure behind me. Long hair. Head tilted. No face. And one hand resting on my back. I don't remember anyone being there. And if this photo was taken last night, then there's only one person who could have taken it. Kento. I had no other choice. After everything that happened, the laughter, the figure in the mirror, the scratch on the door, and the photo Kento left behind, I knew that if I stayed one more night, I had to understand what I was dealing with. I needed answers. I walked down to the front desk in the late afternoon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the old wooden walls, Mr. Yamato was carefully organizing a box of keys, his hands moving slowly. Like it was something he'd done for far too many years. I stood there, watching him. And for the first time since I arrived, I didn't look away. I know about the room. I know it was sealed. I know about the little girl during the war. And I know no one ever stays more than 3 nights. He didn't react at first. For a long moment, he kept organizing the box. Then he turned to face me. You've seen her, haven't you? I nodded. And I don't think she's trying to hurt me. But something worse is coming. He exhaled, slowly. The kind of sigh that belongs to someone who's waited a long time for this moment. You're the 7th person to open that room. His voice was quiet. But every word cut through the silence like a knife. Room 203 wasn't part of the Ryokan's original design. It was added in 1945, when this place was used as a hidden wartime shelter. At least 6 families stayed here. But during the biggest air raid, a little girl, 8 years old, was accidentally locked in the room. No one came back for her. I felt cold spreading from the palms of my hands up to my throat. They found her body, 6 days later. She was still clutching a piece of blanket. Her eyes wide open. Mouth parted. Like she'd been calling for someone, right to the end. We brought in priests. They sealed the room. It stayed shut for over 50 years. I asked. Then why open it again? His eyes flickered. Just for a second. My son thought it was nonsense. After I retired, he took over. He removed the seal. Tore down the charm. Renovated the room to rent it out again. That's when it started. Footsteps. Scratching. Fogged up mirrors. And shadows that only appeared after 2 a.m. The first guest left in the middle of the night. The second canceled their stay from the airport, said they felt like someone was following them. The third never left a message. Police found nothing. Each time, I thought about sealing it again. I looked at him and whispered. Then why didn't you? Because someone still hasn't left. That sentence made my heart skip a beat. The girl, her spirit, she's not angry. She just doesn't understand why she was left behind. Every night, she stands there, waiting for someone to see her. To hear her final call. And when someone answers, something else pulls her back. I swallowed. Something pulls her. There's something else here. It's not her. Not human. It came later. It hides in the room, in the mirror. In the space between your heartbeat and your fear. It's taken over the only place she once belonged to. And now, it doesn't want to share. She's only trying to keep others away from it. Do you understand? I did. And I also knew. I had stayed too long. That night, I didn't eat. Not because I wasn't hungry. But because I knew this night would be different. I packed everything early, stuffed all my belongings into my suitcase, folded the blankets, charged my phone, and turned on every single light in the room. I wasn't planning to run. There was nowhere to run. Instead, I decided to wait. I placed the charm Kento gave me on the tea table. Lit a small incense stick in the ceramic dish beside the mirror, simple. Even though I had no idea if it meant anything. But I had to do something. Anything. 1:30 a.m. I sat cross-legged in front of the mirror. The glow from the paper lamp casting a soft reflection of myself, blurry and still. The room was too quiet. No footsteps. No wind. Just the pounding of my own heart. 1:59. The air began to change. It wasn't that bone-deep cold from before. This was heavier. Thicker. Like breathing in smoke. My skin dampened. Sweat rolled down my back, even though the heater was still running. And then I saw it. In the mirror, it wasn't reflecting me. It was someone else. Still wearing my clothes. Still seated the same way. But the face, lifeless. Hollow eyes. Skin pale as paper. Unblinking. Unmoving. I turned around, terrified. Nothing. But the reflection, she was still there. Staring straight at me. Then, she moved. Not fast. Not slow. She tilted her head, at a strange, broken angle, and slowly raised a hand. Drew a circle on the glass. Right then, the lights went out. The entire room dropped into darkness. Only the faint glow from the mirror remained, and my reflection, still lit up inside it. I tried to move, but my limbs wouldn't obey. My hands were numb. My throat clenched shut. And from the glass, a pale hand reached out. Not violently. It just rested on my shoulder. Ice cold. Heavy as stone. I could feel every bony knuckle, every brittle joint pressing into my skin. Then a whisper, not from the outside. From inside my mind. Kshite. Kshite. A child's voice. But distorted. Like it echoed from deep beneath the earth. I forced myself to speak, voice trembling. Give back, what? No answer. Just the reflection, inching closer. The face, my face, began to crack. Tiny fractures running from the forehead down to the cheeks, like a shattered mirror. Blood seeped out, from the image, not from me. I screamed. Tried to run. But the mirror pulled at me, like gravity warping around it. The room twisted. Tatami mats curled upward. Wind howled through the wooden beams. Windows burst open. And in a sudden flash of light, hundreds of childlike faces appeared in the mirror, staring back at me. Expressionless. Just staring. Like they were about to drag me in. To join them. Just then, a blinding yellow light exploded. The charm Kento had left caught fire without warning, sending thick smoke swirling through the room. And something, or someone, shoved me hard from behind. I hit the floor. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was cracked. One long fracture sliced across it, like a blade through time. No more shadows. No more whispers. Just me. Alone. On the floor. And beneath the smoldering ash where the charm had burned, a message appeared. This time, she saved you. Next time, she might not. I lay there, still. Breath shallow, frozen against the cold tatami floor. My mind foggy, like I had just crawled out of a nightmare that had lasted the whole night. My eyes stared up at the wooden ceiling, where the old beams creaked softly with the wind. There were no more sounds. No voices. No whispers in my head. No silent reflection watching me through the mirror. I didn't know how long I'd been unconscious. All I knew was, when I could finally move again, pale daylight had slipped through the curtains. I slowly sat up. My head throbbed. My heart still pounded, echoing the terror I'd just lived through. And then I saw it. The broken shards of the mirror were scattered across the floor. But something stopped me cold. Not a single piece reflected me. None of them. No reflection. No me. Except, in the largest fragment, tucked in the corner, was a small face. Hers. Clear. Still. Not blurred. Not frightening. Just a little girl, with the saddest eyes I'd ever seen, staring back at me. And this time, she smiled. A faint, fragile smile. Sad, but no longer haunted. Somehow, I could feel it. She wasn't trying to keep me anymore. I moved closer, knees brushing the floor, and knelt before the shard. My lips trembled as I whispered, "Thank you." Just then, wind swept in from the window, lifting the curtains, scattering a few old slips of paper across the air. The last of the charm's ashes dissolved into nothing. And for that brief moment, the room grew brighter. Not from the sunlight, but from something lighter, cleaner, as if something dark had finally let go. I looked back at the mirror shard. She was gone. But then I noticed them, tiny fingerprints on the window glass, pressed from the inside. Not threatening. Not eerie. Just a goodbye. And for the first time since it all began, I cried. Not from fear. But because I understood. That little girl, she never meant to hurt anyone. She had been left behind. She was scared. Alone. And when she saw someone else just as lost as she had once been, she wanted to hold on. To keep them from disappearing, too. But now, she'd learned how to let go. So I could leave. I checked out of the Ryokan early the next morning, before the sun had even pierced through the white mist covering the eastern Kyoto hills. No one saw me off. No goodbyes. I simply left the key on the front desk, where Mr. Yamato always sat. But this morning, the chair was empty. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. No one knew I had been there. No one asked what happened. And I didn't tell anyone. I boarded the first train back to Osaka. As it pulled away, I just sat there, staring out the window. My reflection blinked back at me from the glass. And for the first time in weeks, I saw myself clearly. No one standing behind me. No frozen smile lurking in the dark. Just me, tired, but alive. 3 months have passed since that night. I went back to work. Moved into a small apartment outside the city. Life seems normal again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still wake up, heart racing, convinced I heard 3 soft knocks. There's no one there. Just a memory. Maybe that's all. Last week, while scrolling online, I stumbled across a post on a photography forum. An anonymous user shared an old photo, black and white, taken in a Ryokan hallway somewhere in Kyoto. The angle felt familiar. The flickering light. The shadows along the walls. And there, standing in front of room 203, was a faint silhouette. Small. Child-sized. Head tilted. Staring straight into the lens. No one mentioned it in the comments. They only talked about the lighting. The composition. No one saw the child. But I did. I stared at that photo for a long, long time. Then quietly whispered. "You're still there, aren't you?" Not to scare people. But to protect the ones like you, those who are lost, forgotten, or slipping away from this world without anyone noticing. The Ryokan has a new name now. But if you ever visit Kyoto, and if by chance you're given room 203, keep the lights on. If you hear knocking at 2 a.m., don't answer. Don't open the door. And whatever you do, don't look into the mirror. Because sometimes, what you see staring back isn't you. It's what's been waiting to take your place.